So let's talk through every single chapter master in Warhammer 40k 10th edition and rate them in terms of in-game power. How much do they add to their armies? Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're talking about the exemplars of the chapters, the leaders and commanders that lead their warriors into battle, and how they perform on the tabletop right now. Chapter masters have always been an interesting focal point for their armies in Warhammer 40k, basically trying to be an individual that's the exemplar of the army that they lead. You basically get a great leader of men with some formidable close combat prowess who exhibits all the special skills and quirks of their chapter and shows off the best of what they can achieve. For this one I thought we'd talk through each chapter master in current Warhammer 40k, their stat lines and how much damage they do, their leadership abilities, and how strong I'd rate them for their points in current Warhammer 40k. Jump me straight into it, and first up we have the Shadow Master of the Raven Guard, Kayvaan Shrike, formerly a jump captain fighting with twin lightning claws and promoted to the rank of chapter master in the Primaris era. He fights with some signature Raven Guard equipment with a jump pack and twin lightning claws, who also is equipped in stealthy Phobos armor and has a sniper pistol called Blackout. Kayvaan Shrike is 100 points to put on the tabletop, a captain equivalent stat line with 5 wounds at toughness 4, a 12-inch move with his jump pack and fly, and when he moves around the table he basically always has the lone operative rules on. You can't shoot him within 12 inches whether he's on his own or leading a unit, which is really quite a powerful thing to be able to have him with a unit of 10 assault intercessors, really quite a big intimidating unit that can deal a lot of damage, and the opponent just can't interact with them unless they can get super close. For his weapon profiles, Blackout, that sniper pistol, has 2 shots at 18-inch range with strength 5, damage 2 and precision. It feels maybe a little bit on the incidental side, but occasionally could do something fun. Far more impressive are his Raven's Talons, 7 attacks at strength 5, AP-2 and damage 2, with twin links to stack a bunch of saves on the enemy and also precision as well, and that profile's got a much better chance of taking out a fighting enemy commander. I guess he could potentially soften them up with Blackout first in the shooting phase. Otherwise, for his special rules, he gained the Inspiring Commander special rule, which allows jump intercessors in his army to gain OC2, and that's seriously quite a good buff. They're already pretty good skirmisher units for the Space Marines even without that. It expands the role of what they can do a bit, as well as jumping around for secondaries. It means they can actually put a fair bit of weight on objectives, and even a few of them might be able to steal a point away from the enemy for a turn. Finally, his second special rule is called Echo of the Ravenspire, and this allows you to return his unit to strategic reserve at the end of the enemy fight phase, provided his unit isn't within engagement range of any enemy models. It means that if you just fielding him completely solo, he's basically a Calidus Assassin +1, costing a few more points but having a vastly more threatening melee profile. Or it could mean that you could be bouncing a big unit of jump intercessors around the table with him. I feel like a lot of the time though it just might not be all that tempting to do that, as it just means that when they return to the board, at best they're going to have a 9-inch charge most of the time, so probably aren't going to make close combat in the turn after he's chosen to do that, even if they get a completely different board position. It is just nice that it could be something that you can just look at the end of the enemy turn. If you don't think that you're going to be charging anything in the enemy army in your next one, then you can just trigger that and allow him to have a turn setting up somewhere else, maybe getting safely to a completely different area. At least you have the option to risk a risky 9-inch deep strike charge if that should be the best play. I think I will be most tempted to field him with a squad of 10 assault intercessors with jump packs for 160 points, giving you a fast and pretty dangerous unit that can move very quickly and has some nice anti-shooting protection, and it's still not all that expensive at 260 points for the lot of them. Overall I'd certainly rate him as one of the strongest Space Marine special characters. I've given him an 8.5 out of 10 here. Next up, we've got Commander Dante of the Blood Angels, the very long-serving and experienced commander of the Blood Angels, who's now Lord Regent of the Imperium Nihilus, fighting in his golden armour with his death mask of Sanguinius. Dante costs 130 points to put on the table, and he's the other jump pack chapter master, getting 1 more wound than Kayvaan Shrike, and having a 2+ armour save means he's a tiny bit tankier, and then for his damage output he's got a sustained hits D3 melter pistol in perdition. The far more threatening damage output with the Axe Mortalis, either 8 attacks or 9 on the charge in Liberator Assault Group, or striking at either Strength 8 or Strength 10, AP-3, damage 2 and lethal hits. Quite nice to have some high strength attacks in a unit of Sanguinary Guard for the tough stuff that their Strength 6 or 8 blades might struggle against. He most commonly tends to get fielded alongside a unit of Sanguinary Guard, and often a big 6 of them, giving you a monstrously scary 390 point unit. He makes their threat range a good deal longer, giving you +1 to advance and charge, so that means between that and an advance and charge stratagem, you're odds on to be making charges against units that are 23 inches away. A pretty massive threat range from hiding behind terrain, and then when they get there his troops are far more dangerous as well, as he gives them a native +1 to hit. His bonus special rule is a bit more tame, with a battle shock test at the start of the fight phase. Occasionally it might be able to prevent the enemy using a key stratagem though, it's not nothing. Between his boosted threat range, fairly big hitting stats, and nice buff for a Sanguinary Guard unit, he's really quite a common include, making his way into the majority of Blood Angels competitive list at the moment it seems. He could be interesting enough in the Angelic Inheritors as well, handing out some big rerolls to his unit. Overall, certainly another really strong Chapter Master, easily worth his points, and I've given him an 8.5 out of 10. Next up, we've got the resolute Chapter Master of the Crimson Fists in Pedro Kantor. He is the hero of Rin's world, leading the last of his chapter in a valiant last stand against the Orcs, even after the loss of the chapter's fortress monastery, and through his masterful campaign was able to cleanse his planet of the Greenskins, though it cost the Crimson Fists much. He's got a 5 wound stat line profile with a 2+ save, and he's got a 6+ feel no pain, so again is a little bit on the tougher side for a character, and costs just 90 points to field in game, so not that much compared with some. For his damage, he gets a punchy Stormbolter in Dawn's Arrow, 4 shots to 12 inches. At strength 5, AP 1 and damage 2 with sustained hits isn't too bad shooting for a character. And then he hits very solidly hard in melee for his points cost, 5 attacks at strength 8, AP 3 and damage 3. Great at handling elite infantry, though also enough to worry vehicles. His special rules are interesting enough. His version of Inspiring Commander allows Stern Guards to have objective control too. And if he's leading a unit, then you get +1 to attack for your unit this turn. And that applies both to ranged weapons and melee weapons, so you could have a unit of Stern Guard with a vast amount of shooting, and then a whole stack of melee attacks when they already get lots. And if you charge into your Oath of Moment targets, then you're probably going to absolutely wreck it. Stern Guard get full hit and wound rerolls against their Oath of Moment target, so with a bunch of devastating wound bolters that are getting an extra attack, they're going to cause crazy damage there. Never mind what they get when they charge in, when all those buffs apply to Pedro's Power Fist. The biggest issue with that ability is that it doesn't function in transports. It's a pretty annoying datasheet rule, which means that you don't really want to load him up in an Impulsor or anything, but still could be handy enough in Gladius when he's able to advance and charge with his unit. You could still get quite a lot of threat from them there. Otherwise, for his bonus rule, he gets +1 to hit if the unit's below starting strength, and then +1 to wound for his unit if it's below half strength. Might be handy enough on occasion, though it does rely on the opponent politely damaging a unit but not destroying it to function. Overall, I'd rate him as really not too bad for his points cost. It's got good melee and some good buffing rules. It seems like he's happiest with Stern Guard with their big buffs against the Oath of Moment targets. Perhaps the biggest criticism might be whether or not he really outperforms a standard Space Marine captain, maybe with an enhancement or something for the same role. They can be absolutely brutal in terms of the sheer rerolls and damage that they can do when they activate their big extra attack special rule. That works pretty well with Stern Guard as well, and they also get a free stratagem and are cheaper. I still say Pedro's a solid character though. I'd rate him somewhere between a 7.5 and 8. Before we move on, I'll just give a quick shout out to today's video sponsor in Tabletop Stronghold. They're makers of magnetic carry cases for Warhammer 40K, made in the USA and West Virginia, and they currently have a 25% off Memorial Day sale. Their offering for the magnetic case designs are these mag cases. They're made of a notably sturdy MDF box with steel trays slotted into them. You can slot the different trays at different heights to accommodate different sizes of models. And then they've got a nice acrylic sheet on the front so you can see the contents being transported and show off those paint jobs, and also just see what's where really handily. If you want a tailor-made magnetic carry case, these ones are generally well recommended, and broadly speaking I've heard just about nothing but good things about them. People who have picked them up tend to like them down in the YouTube comments and on Reddit where I've seen them. If you're interested in a terrain set as well, they also have an MDF terrain set that they sell, and that one gets cheaper if bought alongside a mag case, so it could be worth checking out if so. A big thank you to them for sponsoring the video. Feel free to check out their stuff, links down in the video description, and I'll cycle back to them briefly at the end of the video to talk through a few of their different models if you'd like to hear a little bit more about them. Moving on, and next up we have none other than Marneus Calgar of the Ultramarines, who's led the Ultramarines to countless overachieving feats in recent 40k, and many a grave foe including avatars of Cain and all sorts of fell monstrosities have met their ends at the hands of the gauntlets of Ultramar. Calgar is 210 points to field in game and comes alongside 2 Honor Guards, the whole thing being able to attach to a unit, so you basically get one big chunky Death Star style Space Marine unit. As well, Calgar has a pretty immense stat line. Those Victrix guards also have some pretty crazy melee profiles, kind of the equivalent of standard characters themselves. Between them, they've got 10 attacks at strength 5, AP 2 and damage 2, and then Calgar's gauntlets of Ultramar punch hard with 6 attacks at strength 8, AP 3, damage 3 and twin linked, so a solid contribution both against elite infantry and tough vehicles. It also means that you get an unusually tanky unit as well. The Victrix guards getting you 3 wounds with a 2+ save and a 4+ invulnerable, which is both really nice when added in alongside company heroes. So you've got some high save things to tank high AP shots against, and they can still make use of the -1 to wound that the heroes get, and they can do similar for Gravis armoured units as well. For support for the unit, Calgar gives this unit basically all the Gladius doctrines in one: advance, shoot and charge, and then fall back, shoot and charge. Always nice to have a much bigger threat range for a scary melee squad and not have to pay command points for it. And as well as that, he generates a command point a turn with his Master Tactician rule, so generally he wants to be not in a transport for that. He routinely still seems to be making the cut in competitive list despite having gone up in points a couple of times, usually alongside the company heroes and rushing up command points for extra stratagems, and then alongside a squad of company heroes being a nicely durable bully squad that with a bunch of fancy power weapon attacks should threaten to destroy most normal sized units in a single round, and then be harder to take down in return than the opponent would like. Overall, he's certainly been doing well for the Ultramarines currently. I've given him a 9 out of 10 here. I'd probably be debating between maybe a 9 and an 8.5 perhaps. I feel like he's very much seen as a default option, though he certainly costs far more points than he used to, and does need to get some good value of him both out of the command point generation and also his melee damage. Next up, we've got Logan Grimnar of the Space Wolves, complete with his rather stunning new model, standing on his rocky outcrop alongside his pet wolves, generally looking immensely brooding and threatening and ready to lay about the foe with the Axe Morkai. He costs 110 points to field in game, and for that you get a big chunky Terminator stat line, 8 wounds with a 2+ save and a 4+ invulnerable. For his melee damage, he gets 6 attacks at strength 8, AP 2 and damage 3, and then a bunch of wolf attacks to chase that down, so she'll be a little bit better against horde units than the average fighty character. And then his special rules are both interesting, though sort of weirdly don't really help out his squad that he's leading. The Guile of the Great Wolf gives you a command point debuff aura, which is very nice to have in the midboard. It means that if the opponent wants to spend CP on stratagems within 12 inches of him, they have to pay 1 more. That's really going to be a pretty painful ability for the opponent to have to deal with on a midboard objective. And then otherwise he has his High King of Fenris ability. Once per battle round in your movement phase, one unit can arrive from strategic reserves as if it were 1 round later. So basically arrive as if it were battle round 2, being allowed to come in from reserves that turn and maybe turn up at different locations. At least to my understanding of that, it should allow him to arrive via Deep Strike. He'd have to actually put his unit into strategic reserve as opposed to Deep Strike reserve at the start of the game. And then there's that bit in the rules commentary that says if you're on strategic reserve with the Deep Strike rule, you can use that to arrive. I have seen people debate that either way though. I feel like the wording's vague enough that Games Workshop probably should FAQ it, but to me it certainly sounds like the intention is for him to do a first turn deep strike and get a big scary Terminator squad into the midboard. Overall I feel like he's got some fairly good damage and defensive stats for the cost. A command point debuff is seriously useful, and that first turn deep strike is interesting. It's maybe just a bit unfortunate that it's not really going to be able to allow him to do an easy charge or anything like that. He'll still be charging at 9 inches, so unreliable even with a command point reroll, and he can't use it to rapid ingress as it's your movement phase. Overall, I'm genuinely a bit uncertain as to how much he's going to get played in competitive Space Wolf lists, whether or not those 2 good rules are going to be enough to carry him, and if he is, whether or not people will actually want to run him with Wolfguard Terminators, or just literally go it alone. He does have fairly respectable stats in his own right, and soloing it could make it handier for setting up things like the command point debuff aura, and he can still skirmish alright with enemy troops given the wolf attacks. Overall, I've given him an 8 out of 10, maybe not feeling crazy standout, but not too bad. I'll be interested to hear your takes on him down in the comments though. Next up, for another Terminator Armoured Chapter Master, we've got Kaldor Draigo of the Grey Knights. He's 125 points to field, and gets you a similar sort of Terminator stat line with 7 wounds. He is the Chapter Master of the Grey Knights that's lost in the warp, and turns up to help his battle brothers, bursting out of demon incursions, and hacking apart warp spawn with the Titan Sword. He's got a ranged attack with the Scourging with an Anti-Demon 2+ special rule. So again, his main damage is the Titan Sword in melee. This one's got 6 attacks at strength 8, AP 4 and damage 3, so nice high AP there. And again, it's got Anti-Demon 2+. For his special rule, his main one is just delivering a Grey Knight Terminator squad into battle with near certainty. Once per game, when his unit declares a charge out of Deep Strike, you get to add +3 inches to his charge range, so you generally need a 6-inch charge to get in. And with a command point reroll that's really quite heavily odds on, he really quite likes joining a Brotherhood Terminator squad for that. They have some fairly nice synergy with him, giving him lethal hits on that fairly scary profile. Overall, I feel like he's a solid enough choice for the Knights of Titan, making his appearance in plenty of competitive lists, though some of the very heavily Dreadnought spamming Warpbane Task Force ones might pass him up for more Grandmaster Dreadnoughts. Between him and a Brotherhood Terminator squad though, I think that they're a pretty good deal for a near guaranteed charge out of Deep Strike with a command point budgeted. I've given him an 8.5 out of 10. Next up, for another Supreme Grandmaster, we've got Azrael of the Dark Angels. He's 115 points to field in game, and basically seems to be absolutely auto-include in literally every Dark Angels army, just with an all-round good mix of some melee might, nice buffs for his unit, and command point generation. Just literally getting a free command point a turn for an 115 point character, it really isn't too bad though. That makes up a good chunk of his points cost, particularly if he plays a little bit cagey for the first 2 turns to allow him to generate some CP before committing to the fight properly. For his stat line, he's got 6 wounds and a 2+ save, so at least somewhat tanky for a character. He gets a punchy combi weapon with the Lion's Wrath, with anti-infantry 4+ and devastating wounds, so a good chance to inflict some mortal wound damage there. And then in melee, the Sword of Secrets gets you 6 attacks at strength 6, AP 4, damage 2 and devastating wounds once more. Really quite a nice profile against Space Marine equivalents, but at least it will worry tougher stuff as well. Then for his units buffs, he has 2 very nice ones. The Lion's Helm gives you a 4+ invulnerable save for his squad. That's nice for any Space Marine power armor equivalent. The Inner Circle companions can get on really well with that, as that they've got at least a medium tanky stat line already, and then giving that an invulnerable makes it way more so. And then also he grants his unit sustained hits 1. Nice enough for any unit and helps out his own melee. Again, good for the Inner Circle companions, and if you want to try and get more out of it, you could potentially pair him with Hellblasters. In general though, for most Dark Angels armies, he tends to be run either with the companions or with some intercessors. The assault ones can be quite nice to potentially give him 4 rerolls to wounds against things on a midfield objectives, which is rather good in the late game. And a regular squad of intercessors can be good with him as well, giving him a cheap bodyguard and making use of his buffs, and then also having sticky objectives so his squad could guard the home field, and then if it makes sense to in the late game after he's farmed a few command points, he might have the chance to just completely abandon it if the opponent doesn't have a way to get around behind you. Overall, he's basically auto-include for the Dark Angels. I've given him the full 10 out of 10 here. I think just about most armies in the game would take a character like him if he generated command points and had so much useful stuff between damage and buffs otherwise. Next up, we've got High Marshal Helbrecht of the Black Templars. The tireless Crusader of Sigismund is 130 points to field in game, and he's a 5 wound character with a 2+ save. Interestingly enough, he seems to get an extra pip of objective control, maybe due to his little chapter serfs looking after his war gear. He has another anti-infantry combi weapon, not quite as punchy as the Lion's Wrath, but still quite nice for throwing out a few mortal wounds against enemy infantry potentially. And then in melee, he strikes with the Sword of the High Marshals, either 6 attacks at strength 8, AP 3, damage 3, or sweep attacks at strength 6, AP 3 and damage 1. Generally those will both be a pip of strength higher than that, as he adds 1 to the strength when he's leading a unit, and his squad also gets critical hits on a 5+ as well, and that's rather nice when combined with either a Castellan or the Black Templars Vows rules, and the stratagems that you can use to flex into using those. When he takes to the table, it's usually alongside Sword Brethren. They're a fighting squad of Space Marines that are fairly dangerous in their own right, but their datasheet rule is to add +1 to the damage of their attacks, and that means that you could have High Marshal Helbrecht with a sweep profile with 7 attacks, AP 3, damage 2, or potentially his big hitting damage 4 attacks, and depending on the vow that you've chosen, you could either have both sustained and lethal hits going off at the same time, or just one of them for a command point, or potentially do things with a Castellan attached to the same unit as well. The sheer amount of damage that you can do with him, a squad of Sword Brethren, and a command point or 2 is absolutely ludicrous. A big squad with him and a Castellan can comfortably kill Titans. Finally, as if that weren't enough damage as well, he also has his High Marshal rule to give a chance to do some fairly punchy mortal wounds at the start of the fight phase as well. A good chance to get 3 or more on a 4+. Overall, between all that, he's probably one of the strongest Black Templar models right now, though currently their units are struggling a bit, so that's maybe not saying loads. There's no question as to whether him and a unit of Sword Brethren have enough damage or not. I feel like that box is definitely ticked. It's just maybe that isn't the be-all and end-all. He does potentially have the chance to just charge out with them, absolutely ruin something, and then get shot down in short order. They aren't really all that tough for the cost. Having a unit that just obliterates most things in the game is a massive asset to an army list though. I've given him an 8.5 out of 10 here. Finally, we've got a couple of chapter masters relegated to the Halls of Legends. First up, Gabriel Seth of the Flesh Terrors, a brutal chapter master with some cool lore, including survival from the betrayal of his brothers. He's a Legends datasheet, so not recommended for competitive games, though he's 90 points to field in more casual ones. He's a 6 wound character with a 3+ save and a 4+ invulnerable, and he attacks with Blood Reaver with a bunch of strength 8 and damage 3 attacks with sustained hits. He gives his unit inbuilt advance and charge, and his Whirlwind of Gore gives him some extra attacks if there's plenty of enemy models nearby. Overall, he basically amounts to a fairly cheap and fighty character with damage 3 and can advance and charge. I think for the 90 points that's not terrible, though not crazy standout. The damage 3 is definitely nice. Regular captains don't get that, and having a longer threat range could be good to pair with things like Blade Guard or Assault Intercessors perhaps. Though you can get that inbuilt for Blood Angels and Flesh Terrors detachments. Perhaps one of his biggest weaknesses would be that if you take him, then you're not taking any of the other Blood Angels characters' rules as written. So does look out a good number of options though. I feel like he's not crazy standout with the points that they've given him, but at the same time definitely isn't bad either. I've given him a 7 out of 10 here. Finally, and also taking a look at the other Legends rules that they've made for 10th edition, I think Carab Culln the Risen in his Leviathan Dreadnought would still technically count for the Chapter Master of the Red Scorpions. To my understanding, he was the Chapter Master before, got grievously injured, and then was interred in the Relic Sarcophagus. And unless I'm missing any lore update, I think he's still technically Chapter Master, but just has others do the day-to-day running. In any case, if you wanted to use his Legends datasheet, it's 250 points to field in game, and that gives you a big tanky Dreadnought chassis, with 12 wounds at toughness 10 with a 2+ save and a 5+ invulnerable, a twin assault cannon for some devastating wound shooting, a bunch of hunter-killer missiles, and then a big punchy melee weapon in Tarsus Scorpii with 5 attacks at strength 12, AP 3 and damage 4. Interestingly enough, he gets the captain-style rights of battle, so he can use a discounted stratagem on himself if he needs to. So he could be doing things like Gladius Advance and Charge or Tank Shock perhaps, and his other special rule is to ignore the penalty for being in engagement range for ranged attacks. Overall, it's definitely an interesting enough stat line, but it just doesn't really justify 250 points. The free stratagems definitely add some interest, but neither his defense nor his damage is particularly standout for the points cost. It just seems likely you'd be better off with the firepower that things like Redemptor Dreadnoughts could bring as a fairly direct comparison. Both tankier and more dangerous shooting, even if they don't get free stratagems. Overall, I've given her 4 out of 10. It just feels like he costs too much for what he brings, really. Beyond him, though, it looks like the other Forge World Chapter Masters were sent to Legends, so if you have models for things like Gabriel Angelos of the Blood Ravens, I guess you'd use them for proxies for other miniatures in-game at the moment. Overall, between those, it seems that from my rankings I've given Azrael top dog for the best Chapter Master for the points in Warhammer 40k. His generated command points just make him a big asset to the army, never mind having good damage and defense buffs to his unit and some alright melee. Not hard to see why he's thoroughly auto-include for the Dark Angels. Otherwise, I feel like Games Workshop have done pretty well to make most of the rest exciting models to put in your army. Probably Kaldor Draigo, Draigo, Dante and Helbrecht will be my next most favourite, and by then we've already talked about most of the non-legend ones. In any case, let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Which would you rate as the current strongest Chapter Master for their cost in 40k? I'll leave that one there for now though, and before I go I'll just cycle back to the video sponsor and Tabletop Stronghold with their mag case sale, 25% off their designs at the moment. For a rough idea of their product range, here's their tray capacity for how many miniatures you can fit on one of those shelves, around about 90 infantry or 6 armigers. And then they've got their mag case designs of various different heights. The mini one, it costs $75 or around £66. That includes shipping, but there might be VAT or sales tax to pay, and this one can still fit in some big stuff like a Spartan and a bunch of Terminators, as you can see. There's the standard size mag case one, which is easily tall enough to fit in tall models like this Chaos Knight on the ground floor with plenty of room to spare. I'll leave the dimensions of the box sets on the screen, and they also come with a bunch of magnets to attach to bases as well. Finally, there's the really big one in the mag case XL. Basically 2 of the previous attached together for an entire army's worth of transport, and there's different offerings for varying just how many magnetic sheets that you want. As mentioned, they've got MDF terrain as well. You could take a look at that if you're picking up something else, as you get it discounted. A big thank you to them for sponsoring the video though. There'll be links down in the video description if you'd like to take a look over their stuff. I'll leave that one there for now though. Feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics if you'd like to see more like this. I'll certainly keep the regular 40k videos coming with new ones out just about every day. If you've been enjoying all the videos on the channel, feel free to check out the channel's Patreon page. That's links down in the video description. Channel patrons do get a few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with the chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you or you'd just like to help support, the link's down in the video description. In any case though, an enormous thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.